Welcome, everyone. My name is Parker Henley. I'm a faculty member here at Oklahoma State University, where I do a few things. I teach class, advise students. I work in the area of beef cattle management and selection. And then other thing I do is I coach our livestock judging team. So, what better of a topic, I suppose, to talk about than selection? And I've tied this together with selection and management of heifers, and that'll become apparent here in a little bit of why I think those two things are really not uh, can't separate them in a sense. So I'm excited to be here. I'm excited to talk about this and talk about some things relative to your area, but general heifer selection overall. So um, feel free to jump in and unmute and ask questions. We'll have some time at the end as well. But there's certainly no better time. There it goes. Okay. There's no better time than right now, in my opinion, to talk about heifer selection, because this right here is a chart of the beef cow inventory as of January 1. And on the x-axis, it's the number of head, and the year is on the y-axis. But you can see as of 2024, we have the lowest cow herd inventory since that of 1964, actually. So we're going on a lot of years, almost 60 years, since we've had a cow herd number this low. And there's obviously several reasons that could be the case. But some of the big things is that as we come out of this and we look to grow our cow herd, there are some very important things to consider. To me, it is so important to know your goals before we talk about anything else. Um, and so I've put these simple goals up here. I think we can all relate to them. What are the goals of developing heifers so we know how to select them? Okay. Here are six things that I think are very important that we can all relate to. We want our heifers to reach puberty prior to the breeding season. That's pretty self-explanatory in the fact that if a heifer is not has not cycled, they're going to struggle to breed. We want them, the second goal of developing heifer is we want them to conceive early in the first breeding season. Um, there is a lot of data that I can show you end over end that states that heifers that conceive later are less likely to breed back as first calf heifers, which then leads to a higher percentage of them being culled out of the herd. So that's a very important thing. We need them to calve unassisted. So when they do get bred, we need them to calve unassisted. So ultimately, again, I could show data that says that dystocias lead to issues with rebreed after first calf heifers. The fourth goal is we need them to breed back early in the second breeding season. And that goes back to some of those things that I said. We need that heifer that we have selected to have longevity. Um, I think there's a terminology, depends on what you call it, whether it's the break even period of a bred heifer, it's how many calves do they need to have prior to them breaking even and it be worthwhile of you keeping them. I think it depends a little bit on the economics of the year and how long that is. But we can't have a heifer just last 1 to 2 years and then fall out of the herd. We're going to lose money on those. And then the last one is I put my cash cow down here on the bottom. We need cattle that can accomplish all of this at low costs. All right. So as we implement these new heifers, these to me are the six things that are very fundamental that we need to think about as we're selecting those heifers. So when we're selecting heifers, I think there's several things that we need to consider. And I've put this list of them here, and we're going to go through these in depth, and this is kind of somewhat of an outline for the discussion tonight. But once we know those goals, we know that we need heifers that reach puberty early and have fertility. We know we have to have cattle that have a good mammary system and have the appropriate milking ability. We need to have cattle that are not culled from the herd. That goes back to longevity, and that could be because of disposition. That's pretty important. And then we also know that there are certain phenotypic things that could lead to culling from the herd or a lack of longevity. Maybe it's fleshing ability. Maybe it's just the calf crop doesn't have an ideal phenotype that we're marketing. Maybe it's their feet, their structural soundness. We'll come back to that in a little bit. And then, as we talked about some of those key things that cattle need to reach, growth rate is pretty important. And then finally, calving unassisted, obviously calving ease of those heifers is very important. So I'm going to go into a little bit more depth on each one of these, but I think this is the big key things that you need to consider when selecting a heifer based upon the overarching goals of heifer development. So what does the timeline look like? Well, there's a couple different things in production systems to keep in mind. Will you be selecting heifers in herd replacements, ones that you have bred, or are you going to be purchasing heifers prior to their first calf? Well, that or prior to breeding. There's a couple different options there. So I'm going to talk about this relative to you keeping back heifers from within your herd. All right. And so here's a timeline. And I think all things need to be considered from birth. Okay. The first thing I have here is date of birth. This can be extremely the most fundamental and basic selection trait for replacement heifers. There is a lot of work out there that has looked at all different indicators that have led to a successful bred heifer. But one of the simplest ones has been selecting for heifers born earlier in the breeding season or heifers that are older. Um, this actually leads to a heifer being older by breeding season, which gives them a higher likelihood that they have reached puberty and have cycled. And they're also likely at a greater weight at the time of breeding, which allows them to achieve higher pregnancy rates, then ultimately leading to a greater success on down and more longevity. This can ultimately be a very easy, simple selection tool. Maybe instead of keeping back the younger heifers that don't match up, getting the older ones, the ones born first in a breeding season. I put EPDs early on, anytime from birth to weaning. There are a lot of companies out there now that do genetic panels outside of EPDs, maybe like Igenity I put up here in the top right corner, where you can send in a DNA sample and they can give you some maternal indicators for those cattle and scores, okay? Even when they're not purebred progeny, that could be a very great time. Weaning is another selection time that I think really needs to occur. Maybe this is where you assess body condition score of some of the heifers. We assess their mammary systems. We assess their growth rate again. Were they still high performing cattle within the herd? I think one of the largest selection criteria or selection time points is going to be at the breeding season, or that time of 14, 15 months of age. Okay. We ultimately want to try to get our heifers to calve at 2 years of age and calve at the same time as our cow herd. Okay. In doing that, we need to breed those heifers at about 15 months of age to calve at 24 months of age. Well, there is a lot of data out there stating that a to have a pregnancy rate achieved that is of a goal that we really want to have, we need to have those heifers reaching about 65% of their mature weight. Okay. About 2/3. There's some data that says that we can go lower than 65%. I would say body weight and age kind of intersect. So if you're going to go with, you're going to try to get heifers bred at a lower weight, you're probably better off waiting till they're a little bit older. If you're wanting to breed heifers earlier, you probably need to push them a little harder and get them to a higher weight. Now, the question I always get, and I know we're not face to face and could pop up, but I bet somebody would be like, well, how do I know what their mature weight is going to be before they're mature? And that's a great question. What I would do, and what's the common theme, is to know what the mature weight of your cow herd or the genetics they're coming out of are, because mature weight is dictated by environment. So if you're able to weigh your cows at weaning, when they've just weaned off a calf and they're in about a body condition score of 4 to 6, or kind of not too fat, not too skinny, and they're in ages between 3 and 10. If we can know what our average mature cow weight is of our herd, that's going to allow us to know a nice target weight. So I know mature weights of cow herds is oftentimes very controversial. I think we all think we have 1,100 pound mature cow weights, and that might be very well the case for some of you all in New Mexico. That may be the only type that'll fit. I know here in the Midwest, most people say, "Oh, I've got a 1,200 pound cow," and you go look at them, and you'd be lucky if any of them are under 1,500 pounds. So um, it's pretty simple math. If you think your average cow herd's 1,300 pounds, if you multiply that by 0.65, that's going to give you a target body weight for your heifers. Okay. And I think ultimately, we'll come back to that in a minute here. The biggest key is that a lot of times, heifers that do not get bred by this yearling breeding season are ones that have to be culled. All right. And then I think the last selection time point is going to come at pregnancy diagnosis. Okay. And the lack of a pregnancy diagnosis of being pregnant might be the case that they did not cycle, they did not conceive. And it's very important to cull those open heifers that are younger than 2 years of age at that point, because those cattle are still considered young, and you might not get a discount at the sale barn. Those cattle can still go into a feed yard at that point and not be too far behind, even if they've been backgrounded and exposed during that period. If you wait till the following year, those cattle are going to start to show age and will be significantly discounted when you go to sell them if you don't preg check them. That's very important. So let's talk about fertility and how do we assess that. I think one of the greatest ways to get a bump in fertility in your cow herd is through hybrid vigor, heterosis, by using, maybe understanding that this year I want to keep back a larger percentage of heifers. I'm going to select maybe a crossbred bull, a bull that's going to lead to a crossbred calf, excuse me, a bull that's of different breed than the makeup of my cow herd. I put this picture up here. The most common one we think of is that black baldy replacement heifer, which results from the Hereford on an Angus-based cow herd. And heterosis hybrid vigor is really strong in our fertility and reproductive traits. It's pretty quickly advanced. Some additional things that we can look at from a fertility standpoint is our reproductive tract scoring, which can be done prior to the first breeding season, at weaning time even, where a veterinarian is going to give you some scores. That may eliminate a few. We want to achieve a 60 to 70% first service pregnancy rate of our heifers. That's what we're shooting for. And then ultimately, if we turn out bulls for a 60 to 70 day window, we're looking at key markers of 90 to 95% pregnancy rate. If those are not achieved, we likely might have young heifers or underdeveloped heifers. And then the quickest way to improve fertility of your cow herd is to cull those opens. Do not give them a chance, a second chance, because it's going to lead to fertility issues long term. The second thing that I had put on that slide was the milking ability. Um, and milking ability is a little bit of a caveat, and I'm aware that several of you all on this might have vastly different production systems. And so milking ability might be a touchy subject. All right. And I think it's something that you need to consider whether you want high milking ability or low milking ability. And I'll cover that in just a little bit as I talk a little more about the phenotype here. But the quickest way to do that is through our EPDs of the sire. Okay. You might be asking why say low or high. Well, the quickest way, the number one reason that you're going to cull a cow is that she is open. If we know simple things about an animal's system and how they partition energy, is that the first system that is compromised when an animal is in a negative energy balance or they do not have enough food is their reproductive system. So, in places in the United States or environments that are very challenging, animals that have extremely high milking ability tend to out milk the resources available, and then they ultimately go into a very negative energy balance. They lose body condition score, and they compromise their reproductive system, which ultimately leads to them being open. I would consider the milk EPD of the sire. If you are in an environment that has great forage, you have unlimited resources, I would consider a milk EPD of the sire that is higher. That would lead to better, maybe bigger calves at weaning. If you're in one of those very challenged environments that we were talking about there, I would definitely consider a more moderate to low milk EPD on the sire. That's going to help those heifers not out milk the resources they have available. Additionally, we do not want to select for overly fat heifers. The ones that of the calf crop that are extremely fat, and I'm not saying moderately fat, when they get excessive, they develop fat into their mammary gland and in their flank, and then that leads to lower milk production as first calf heifers. I understand that looking at a weaned heifer calf and trying to assess their udder and teats can be very, very hard. Okay. But it's something we need to look at. We need to make sure their teats are square, they don't have excess hair or fat down there. And then as they become bred heifers, we want to look at that as well. But maybe the best way to know if we've got a great mammary system is to look at the dam. If we're having cows that are having enlarged teats, they're not milking very much, they're milking in excess, that's probably the best way we can get an indicator we don't want to keep a heifer out of that specific cow. So I definitely think using those things would be great ways to assess the milking ability of heifers. This is always my funny slide here that I put at the end here, but we can oftentimes underestimate the value of disposition of our heifers. All right. It is moderately or highly heritable, and there is nothing more frustrating than that one wild cow that we can never get in, and her calf that always throws a wrench in everything. All right. Um, if you go out and you're supplementing your heifers daily, and they they do not, the one that stands off and never comes to the bunk is making the rest of them wild. There is a real economic value to that. I would consider culling those really, really wild and heifers that just are going to lead to some issues from a herd management standpoint. I think that's pretty simple, but at the same time, uh, it's important, and I get it. The next big thing I talked about is that I put down there was the phenotype of the animal. And you might be asking, I'm definitely one of those guys that can prioritize evaluating the phenotype of the animal. I'm the livestock judging coach here at Oklahoma State. I do this all the time and look at them. It is important, um, and it's important to know which traits to look for. I put up this 30-year normal precipitation graph here, and you guys can see that I'm from Oklahoma right here, where that area down by Fort Smith, Arkansas, all the way out to Guyman, Oklahoma, you go from dark blue to the orange category there. So pretty well from tropical to desert. And so this is really important in our area. You guys are more in the more arid climate there. But what I'm telling you is that the phenotype, the type of beef heifer that really thrives, um, depends a little bit on where you are at in the United States. When I spent time in Illinois, the type of heifers they like to keep back up there were quite a bit different than the ones that some guys in Western Oklahoma are going to keep. And that's going to be dictated basically on the forage availability and the resources that we can provide for those heifers. For example, big framed, cattle that project out large mature cow sizes of 15, 1600 pounds can be useful in states like Illinois, where they have silage available and readily there, and lots of feed resources. But you're going to struggle to get that 15, 1600 pound cow to flesh and breed back in our tougher environments, like a lot of you come from in Western Oklahoma. So that's just a real example about how our grazing situations can really dictate the phenotype that we can go after here. And so I'm going to work off the assumption that we definitely want to keep cow size in check. We don't want midget cows. I'm not saying that, but we want a moderate, a smaller sized cow that possesses some traits. And these are two vastly different pictures here of heifers, but some things that I would consider is that if we have a group of heifers that we're managing and we're going to select our top end replacements from, and the average body condition score, let's say, is a 5. So they have a little bit of fat on them. They're in the middle. There is always going to be some that are more fat, and there are going to be some that are less than the average. That's how groups and populations, contemporary groups work. Okay, those heifers that achieved a little more flesh, they have a bigger body type. All those heifers were given access to the same resources. The ones that were a little fatter are the ones that I would consider easier fleshing. They might have a lower maintenance energy requirement, so the extra feed has went towards growth and fat deposition at that point. And so what do we look for? I look for cattle that I call easy fleshing. And on this picture, I have a black heifer here with two yellow tags. And if you look at her, it's a front 3/4 view here. She's got a tremendous rib shape. She's deep bodied. You can really tell her body and rib type is that of a animal that will be exceptional at consuming forage. And then we can tell that she's deposited fat in a reasonable manner. I cannot say that this heifer ate less or more feed than anyone. She might have ate a lot of feed. That might be the case. That's the tough thing with intake. But what I do know is that whatever she's been given access to, she has been able to flesh and perform well because of that body and consume forage. So I consider cattle that have a really good rib type, they have some flesh on them to be the kind that'll flesh and perform very, very well. On the right, I have a heifer over here that's long and shallow and maybe not the ideal body type. So definitely on the left is the more desirable rib body type phenotype from a muscle and dimension standpoint. That's very basic, I understand. The other thing in phenotype that I talked about is their feet. And I encourage you to foot score. There are rubrics out there from the American Angus Association with foot scores like this. Ultimately, we're looking for cattle that are around a 5. We want that hoof quality of a 5. We want a round hoof with some heel depth, and we want toes that point forward. We obviously don't want cattle splay-footed, or probably the most common we see are the ones with curled toes. There's definitely some production concerns associated with that. Again, good feed on our females is very, very important. One of the other big targets I talked about was growth rate. Not only do we want growth rate as it translates to maybe cattle that have higher weaning weights, which we can ultimately turn into more value. We need cattle that can achieve those targeted growth rates. I talked a lot about we need cattle that can reach 65% of their mature weight. And I've given this example. If we've got 1,400-pound cows, that means we need our heifers to weigh 840 pounds at breeding. Well, if that's the case, I know that I can take 840 minus what my heifers weigh currently and divide it by the number of days till breeding, and I can get a really nice target average daily gain. And if I know what my heifers need to gain from an average daily gain basis, I can go to my nutritionist and say, I've got these black heifers. I'm looking for them to gain 1.5 pounds a day. I need a feed, a supplement that's going to do that and come up with a pounds per day to give them. Okay. So we also need to forget that, or don't forget that once we breed the heifers, they're not done growing. We also need to look at continuing to develop them. We want them to weigh about 80% of their mature weight when they do calve, and then help them continue to grow past their first calving date. And so cattle that are able to grow and perform and flesh are very, very important. Now, I put this here as a strategy. It's something that I looked at in my PhD specifically was, let's say, what I have here is a body weight on the x-axis and then a month of age over here on the right. So 6 all the way up to that 15. So if our weaned heifers weigh a little less than 500 pounds, and we know we need to get them to 780 pounds by 15 months of age, do we feed them the same to target a consistent average daily gain? Or do we change that up? Some people will grow them a little slower at first, and then we'll ramp them up as associated with the blue line there so that they're gaining weight very, very quickly. What we would not want to do is have them grow really fast post weaning and then stall out, maybe like the green line. That can lead to maybe excess condition in utter sensitivity of our replacement heifers there. So we definitely want to grow them along at a right weight. One of the last things that I talked about, I pointed out, was calving ease. Okay. Um, I always joke in our cow-calf classes here, um, the only people that like to pull calves are first-year vet students. All right. And no one else does. It's not a fun experience most times. They're challenging to get into the facilities, and it seems like there is never a good situation when you got to pull a calf out of a first calf heifer. Not only do they not want to get up and milk, but then that cow takes longer to cycle back. You're just less likely to keep them. So something that a lot of people do is do pelvic measurements, and that can be done by your veterinarian. There's several times that they can do that. But in a general rule of thumb, if you divide the yearling pelvic area by 2.1, it'll indicate the size of calf in pounds that they should be able to deliver unassisted. For example, if the pelvic area was 175 centimeters and you divide that by 2.1, that's going to tell us that heifer could have an 83-pound calf unassisted. This is a rule of thumb generally. That's not that's probably saying that calf is in a normal position at that rate. Okay. So it is important. It's something that we can consider. The other thing that we could look at is the maternal calving ease EPD of the sire as well. It goes back to a little bit of EPD selection there also. So very important things to consider. So I'm going to wrap all this up here and kind of have a couple final thoughts here. It can be confusing. There's a lot of information to consider, but I would consider selecting heifers that were of the oldest within their calving window, and that can be a pretty effective way. We need to develop those heifers to reach 65% of their mature weight by the start of the breeding season. Okay. And, this can be a pretty good time point that if those heifers didn't reach that, then we can cull them off. And you're basically selling a nice backgrounded heifer through the sale barn that might have more value going into the feed yard than anything. And you're really not set back much more time. Okay. So that's an important time to cull those cattle off, is at the start of the breeding season, if they're not of that weight specifically. Definitely cull all open heifers at the end of the first breeding season. You are not going to lose much on those cattle if you go ahead and market them as young cattle at that point. And then if you keep them, you're going to go down a train, a road where fertility is lacking from that point on forward there. So very, very important to consider. And then I would consider growing your bred heifers adequately, looking for an adequate phenotype from a rib, a body, a foot quality standpoint. Look at udders as well. And then we want to target those cattle to be at a body condition score 6. If they're not able to achieve that body condition score 6 and they're too thin, they're likely going to have struggled to rebreed during that first breeding season there. So that is very, very important. So ultimately, I appreciate you all listening to me and talk about these things here. It is an extremely important topic, heifer selection. That is a huge investment that you are putting in developing those cattle, and they're going to be your cow herd. 50% of the genetics of your calves, and so it's important. Take your time, but my big key: don't overcomplicate it. With that, I'll take any more questions. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Parker. So I believe there was a question that entered your chat box. It
Great.
will be from one of our presenters here.
Yeah. Okay. So we asked the question from Mel here is, can you talk about synchronization and the importance of it relative to breeding first calf heifers? Well, there is some data out there that says that if you put a CEDAR, controlled internal drug release, with progesterone in it, into a heifer for, if you look at some of the protocols, there might be ones that are 14-day long CEDARs. That uh, progesterone will kickstart a heifer into cyclicity or start them or make them reach estrus. Okay. And so that's why they tell them to do that. And what we can also do is it's more likely to get cattle cycling. And then it also, if you synchronize them and AI them, you're going to have a tighter calving window. For example, I know if you're going to go and watch and check bred heifers every night and the whole group calves within, or the first 60% of them calve within, about a 10-day window, that's a lot better than, being spread out over a natural service breeding season. So I would say the biggest reason though that people talk about synchronization is kickstarting their reproductive system with that progesterone that is in a CEDAR, is the biggest reason. Hopefully that helps, Mel.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mel, for your question. We can go ahead and take some questions now. So if you want to unmute yourself and ask away, or you can go ahead and insert your questions in the chat box. While you guys are figuring out a question, I'm going to go ahead and release our poll. So it has launched, so it should be up on your screen. So if you be kind enough to fill out that poll for us, I would greatly appreciate it. Any type of additional information, comments that you want to share, that could be on this webinar or any other webinar that you want to see, that you want for us to touch base on, or in-person events, what type of workshops that you want to see later down the road. So there's also chapter affiliation in county. So if you're from the reservation, you can go ahead and insert what chapter you're closest to. And if you're not on the reservation, just type in what county you're from. Any more questions?
Hello, this is Marge Lantana. I don't really have a question, but I just, the information that was provided by our presenter is very meaningful, and I kind of followed all your outline of presentation. I just thought, wow, I'm really hanging in there, following the same presentation that you did. Like I do select replacement heifer from my own herd, and usually the oldest one. And there are some oldest one, but I kind of observed their mama cow, how they performed it, like you said, the udder to the cow. If it wasn't that great, then I wouldn't grab her calf at all. So right now I'm weaning like 8 calves, and I think they weigh like maybe close to 700 pounds now, because most of the cows that calves we hauled in, they were like close to 650 to 700. So I'm looking forward to it, and there's other new topic you brought up that I will utilize. So I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Marge. Thank you, Mel, for your questions and for your feedback. Any more questions that we have from the audience tonight?
Hello, good evening. My name is Trina. Just to kind of piggyback off Marge, certainly this was very informative. I'm going to have to go back and do a little bit more research. is it called heterosis, where
Yep.
you get a different bull, a different sire, and bring it to your herd for greater fertility? Is that what you mentioned?
Yeah, so what heterosis, the definition of it is, it's a fancy word for saying that a calf's ability to outperform the average of its parents. It's like the idea that, my mom and dad, my dad's 6 foot and my mom's 5'10", but I'm 6'6". So that ability to out, or in a cow's term, a bull had a weaning weight of 600, and the female had a weaning weight of 500, and magically that calf weighs 650 pounds. When the genetics are not similar, animals tend to have this heterosis. They outperform the average of their parents. So you can sometimes get into a kind of vicious cycle of always using, Angus on Angus on Angus on Angus, where they don't get any heterosis. Where if maybe you use a Hereford on an Angus, kind of bring in totally outcross genetics, you are going to get a bump, hybrid vigor from that crossbred kind of calf. And the traits that really respond to hybrid vigor are traits like like reproductive traits, fertility. That makes sense. So
Okay, thank you so much.
yeah.
Thanks, Trina, for your question. We'll take one more. If anyone has another question, then we can go ahead and conclude our webinar for tonight. If not, then we'll go ahead and move forward to our announcements. Okay. All right. Well, I guess that will conclude our webinar for tonight. I just want to say thank you so much, Parker, for hopping on here and providing this presentation. It was very beneficial and helpful. I definitely will be reaching back out to you pretty soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate
thank
it.
you. You're more than happy to stick around for our announcements, or you can go ahead and exit out of our Zoom.
All right. Well, I'll head out. Thanks a bunch.
Thank you. All right. Well, thank you everyone for hanging in there and answering our polls. I greatly appreciate it. So this here flyer that has been up for a couple of minutes, we do have a cattle reproduction workshop that's coming up on November 14th. And this is going to be held at Herfino Chapter House. So if you're in the area that day, definitely stop by. This is going to be touching base on calving preparation, reading bull sales catalogs, bull selection, and ultrasound live demo. So this is going to be presented by one of the extension specialists coming from the Nick College land grant, and her name is Justina Slim. So we will be at Herfino Chapter House on November 14th, and it's going to be starting at 10 a.m. and roughly in around about 2 a.m. or 2 a.m. So sorry, 2 p.m. My mistake. But we will have that information on our Facebook page. And next we do have is the livestock record keeping workshop. So this is going to be hosted at the Nosh Chitty Chapter House, and it will be on November 18th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. So if you're interested in learning a lot about livestock record keeping, definitely scan that QR code. It's not required, but we would like kind of a number of those, a number of how many folks are going to be coming out during that day. So this is a webinar here, and this is going to be fruit tree diseases and disorders for northern New Mexico. And this is going to be presented by Philip Lujan. So this will be on November 20th, and like all of our webinars, it's going to start at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time. So if you want to go ahead and register, scan that QR code. If you are on your phone, don't worry, just head over to our website and you just type in nsa.nmsu.edu. and head under our upcoming events, and it should have all the information there for you to register. And kind of just wrapping up, we do have a conservation planning program. Those of you that are on here, you guys are pretty much familiar with it. So I'm not going to go into detail. Pretty much, it's just basically we provide free technical assistance services for ranchers and farmers to help them start on their conservation plan. So this is a partnering effort with the Nate College Land Grant Office. So we provide services on conservation planning assistance. So if you are a producer, or grazing permitting here in the Eastern or Northern Navajo agencies, and you follow the BIA protocol of having a conservation be attached with your grazing permit, definitely we can assist with that. Not only do we assist with one-on-one conservation planning assistance, we also do conservation planning workshops. So if that is something that you're interested in and you're perhaps a grazing official or a farm board member, definitely reach out to us. So to request a workshop at your chapter meeting or location, wherever, maybe at the Nate College, one of the campuses in Shiprock, definitely reach out to us. So the person that you would want to talk to will be Shirley Toth. She is our project specialist, and she's also in charge of our conservation planning program. So definitely we are on Facebook. Share all of our upcoming events, in our webinars are recorded and will be posted on our YouTube channel. We also release a bi-monthly newsletter. So if you're interested in attending our newsletters, you can head over to our website, and under newsletter content, it will ask you if you want to be added to our newsletter platform. But other than that, thank you all for joining us this evening, and I hope you guys have a good night. So thank you so much.
Thank you, Mikhail.
Our project is funded by the USDA Outreach and Assistance for Native Farmers and Ranchers and Veteran Farmers and Ranchers program. So at NSA, our primary goal is to support producers by providing resources that will help improve their operations, both profitability and sustainability. For those of you that are on here, you may have been aware about what we deliver in person as far as workshops and webinars. We tailor it to our producers' needs based on the feedback that we gather from each session. And so if you've come back to our webinars, you've noticed that at end of these sessions, we release polls, and those polls give us reviews and feedback that what we need to provide more often for our producers here locally. And as well as our in-person events, and some of you may have seen them, maybe or maybe not, and those would be our evaluations that we gather from end of our workshops. So some of you recently have been around our workshops that include livestock record keeping. One of them, the main one that a lot of producers look forward to, is our livestock first aid trainings and food preservation workshops that we have provided these past couple of months, and among others as well. So we're pretty fortunate to partner with the Nate College Land Grant Office, as well as our New Mexico State University CES specialist. Both of them play a crucial role in helping us develop these agricultural resources for our producers. So we just want to applaud for them, for giving their insights and their feedback, and helping coordinate these agriculture events. So not only do we deliver livestock first aid trainings and food preservation workshops, but we also, another essential goal of ours is to help our producers increase their knowledge in USDA programs. So many of you are already aware or may have been familiar with NRCS and FSA programs such as forage drought loss assistance, crop disaster assistance. So through our virtual resource fairs, we do give USDA local field offices a platform to share their project details, so ranchers and farmers can learn how to access and support that aligns with their needs, like applying for EQIP and NRCS, through NRCS, I'm sorry.